I just want to move away from events here in the UK to some breaking news that we are getting from Bangladesh. We are hearing that the Bangladesh Prime Minister has resigned and left the country here, destination unknown. This comes as thousands of people have stormed the Prime Minister residence. What we are going to do is join my colleague Azadik Masheri, who is talking to Samira, say attacks on the ground. Look, ever since these protests broke out about ago, many foreign journalists have been trying to get into the country, but no one has been able to get any visas to allow us to give us some of that first-hand accounts, which is why we are depending on a lot of freelance journalists that are in the country now. One person that is working with right now has said that really he can see lots of people celebrating on the street, hugging, exchanging garlands. It's real sense of a jovial kind of atmosphere, and that would lead people to believe that in fact Sheikh Hasina has resigned from the position, and there are many media reporting that she has actually already left the country. If that is in fact the case, it is a dramatic turn of events for Bangladesh and the Prime Minister. Remember, Sheikh Hasina only got like had there were elections rather in Bangladesh just earlier this year in January, in which Hasina won her fourth term, but those elections rather were mired in a lot of confusion, or rather there were questions about the elections legitimacy because the main opposition party did not contest in those elections. Opposition party did not contest in those elections, and there were crackdowns on other opposition members that were trying to campaign, and so I think there are just a lot of questions about democracy and rule in Bangladesh for a very long time. Well, to that point, Samir, I also to confirm, a correspondent has now told us, one of our colleagues has told us that Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has resigned now. As a reminder for anyone who is joining us right now, we've been covering the protest in Bangladesh. The Prime Minister has now resigned, and according to reports has fled the country that as protesters have stormed her residence. Now, as a reminder, student leaders have declared a campaign of civil disobedience, as they put it, to demand that step aside. That seems to have been successful, and it's been at times violent. On Sunday, at least 90 people were killed and hundreds more injured in clashes between police and tens of thousands anti-government protesters, and the death toll does include at least 13 police officers. Samira, could you just put this into context for us, given the hold that Sheikh Hasina has held on the country in the past? How big a movement this would be for the country? Look, Sheikh government, not just this particular term, but her last few terms have been mired in controversy. Lots of international members of the internal community critical of her increasingly authoritarian regime. Now remember, these particular protests started about a month ago, and originally it was student, and they were demanding end to these quotas that exist for civil government jobs, and that was in fact overturned by the country Supreme Court. But since then, seen that more the protests have really swelled, and it became much more of a movement to try and remove Sheikh Hasina from power. It became a very much an anti-government movement. Now the ruling government, of course, has called the protesters terrorists and said that they are just operating on behalf of the opposition parties in the country. But this fact that we are seeing that Sheikh Hasina has actually resigned, has left her opposition, and now going to another country, a safer country. In all likelihood, she probably going to come here to India. I mean, this is a really dramatic move for Bangladesh, and now of course it backs a question of what's going to happen in terms of government. What is the leadership structure going to look like, and is this going to end up leaving some kind of power vacuum? Now it's going to be really interesting to see just what happened on the ground. And Samira, just for context for our audiences, we are showing live from one of the broadcasters that showing some of the protests that have been taking place from channel 24, and we are seeing people celebrating, we are seeing people march. A few moments ago, before, we were watching people storm the residence of Sheikh Hasina, as we mentioned earlier the place that she is said to have fled. Samira, could you remind us the police response that had taken place? How does something like this succeed and happen? What happened to the military, for example? Because there were questions were not there about whether the military would intervene against students' right, and there was no sense that the military was going to intervene, which perhaps could lead to questions about the loyalties of the military and whether that has in fact shifted. I mean, look, it's not just the student-led protest that are going to push, that are going to bring a government down slowly, at least perhaps in this situation, but it is probably going to be a confluence of events. There is going to be questions about how much support that Sheikh Hasina had within her own government, and perhaps she was losing confidence there. The police crackdown on the student protest has really quite harsh, very severe. We saw that some 300 people have died in the last month or so, and that is worse than that's the violence that they have not seen since the country has fought its war of independence back in 1971. So this is a very significant moment in Bangladesh politics. 1971. So this is a very significant moment in Bangladesh politics and in the country. And I don't know if you can see these pictures, but we are still showing them from the broadcast, the local broadcaster there, and we are seeing people with chairs. So far it seems that these are coming out of the residence. Again, Sheikh Hasina is said to have fled with her sister to a safer place. We still are not sure of the location, but it looks like people are grabbing anything they can find or destroying the premises as they declare this sort of victory. I do want to again pause and reflect on what a big moment this would be, given Sheikh Hasina has essentially been in charge since 2009, is in her late 70s, and now it would seem she is being toppled by the student movement. Samira, could you put into text what sort of the victory this is for the students, because they question democracy, whether democracy truly exists in Bangladesh? How have elections take place in the past? Well, in as far as the election have taken place, I was on the ground for the most recent elections in Bangladesh, and did not have opposition parties that were contesting in the elections. You saw on the ground only flyers and posters and billboards for those that are contesting as part of the government. So there really was not much of an election atmosphere, and in fact we were able to speak with people that did work for the opposition parties, and they would operate in secret. There was a lot of people that were scared for their own safety. We spoke with one opposition party official, who said that he doesn't even spend his nights at home because that's usually when government officials come knocking. So there was this real pervasive sense of fear for anyone that did not know the government line of. If you are seeing the kind of reaction that we are seeing with people storming into the Prime Minister home and looking the Prime Minister place, you can imagine this is a group of people that have felt that they were very much put down and we are under authoritarian rule, and it's this sort of movement for them to break free and are doing this can sometimes be a Catholic sort of reaction, the rule that they have injured since, as you rightly pointed out, 2009. And Samira, I also just want to pause here on how events have moved so quickly in some ways, especially in the last few hours that you and I have been speaking, because this morning we were talking about the march starting. We were expecting an army chief to give an address at about 8 GMT, and we were talking about curfews and internet blackouts. It just seemed like none of that was able to prevent someone who's seen as a somewhat authoritarian leader staying in post. So what was that sort of security infrastructure that has collapsed? We have seen a sort of weakness like this before? Well, I think we started getting some early signs of a change or a shift when we heard that the speech was being delayed, or the address the nation by the army chief was being delayed, because there were still some internal negotiations that were happening. There are also some unconfirmed reports that Sheikh wanted to deliver a taped address to the nation, but apparently that was not possible. There was a lot more of a push to try and get her out of the country, because if you saw on the streets that thousands of students were mobilizing a make a march towards Dhaka, towards the city center, and presumably to the place. So there was certainly a security issue for the Prime Minister and her family. But then we saw that although there were lots of police barricades in the around of city of Teko, we saw that the police were actually allowing the students to come in. So I mean, those were early indications that you saw actually there was a monumental shift that was happening within the government. Now we mentioned the general there that we are waiting to hear from him. He does speak, we've been waiting more than 90 minutes now, but there are reports from news agencies that Zaman was holding meetings with stakeholders. So there is the possibility that an address might be same in terms of this unrest. I know, Samira, you went into this a little bit earlier, but what happens in a country when the Prime Minister has failed? We are seeing unrest. Who is likely to step in the sort of scenario? Well, I think that's the big question. Sorry, I was trying to get some more information from colleagues that are on the ground in Dhaka, and I mean, that's really going to be the big question. The last thing on earth you want to see in some kind of power vacuum in any country, but particularly Bangladesh, because we have seen such clashes between anti-government protesters and the police. I think what's important here now is to vary and get a sense of the allegiance of the military, and there are questions about whether this is the country will now emerge into some kind of military rule until a new government can be formed. These are all questions that I full think that that people on the ground are really still trying to work out, which is presumably why we have not heard from the army chief. Thank you very much.